And a lot of the focus was on primaries, but Nebraska is a caucus state. There are a lot of benefits to caucuses that aren't talked about in the mainstream media, like they can just get registered right there, and it increases turnout for the democratic process. Can you talk about the differences between the two and where the commission is lying on those differences?
Yeah, so I sometimes think people think that caucuses are really unfair and burdensome because people have to be at a site for 4 or 6 hours. But we're going to be making reforms so the caucuses are really accessible to working families and just busy young people. So we'll have a requirement that you can do absentee voting, so you can just vote from home and send it in, or you can just come to the caucus site and vote right then and there. But the beautiful thing for small states, especially small red states like Nebraska for caucuses, is that we can require people to register to vote that day. We don't have same-day voter registration in Nebraska, so we could easily get 10 to 20,000 people to register as Democrats with the caucus process. And that's something that I think gets forgotten by some big states that are like, why are we doing caucuses? It's too burdensome. But for small states, it's part of a big party building effort that we do and getting more Democrats into the party.
Speaking of party building and big states, a lot of this was focused on New York itself and how difficult and cumbersome, burdensome it is to vote in a Democratic primary. Why is it that it's still so difficult to change? I mean, Nomiki pointed out that who even heads the Democratic Party in New York State? And besides California, it's considered the most liberal state in the country. How focused is this commission on reforming New York and big states with burdensome processes like that?
The commission's going to be very clear that we think that the New York primary process right now, the way that you have to change your party registration almost a year in advance, is just not a sustainable system, and it really is isolating voters and disenfranchising voters. And so we'll make clear recommendations on that. But on the broader clear recommendations that we're going to be making is that there should be automatic voter registration, and that really is the solution at the federal level. There are so many intricacies at a state-by-state level that it starts to get very confusing for voters, especially voters who are moving to different states. As we know, millennials are often moving into different states for different lifestyles. So we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate in democracy, which would mean automatic voter registration.
Well, we learned something important today. Everybody had said that the problem in New York was that the legislature had to change it. But what we learned from the New York State official today was, in fact, the state party can change it. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure put on the New York State Party to open up the process there. Hopefully the governor will get involved in helping to open the process. So now that we know that the Democratic Party can do it all on its own, I think that really changes the game in New York.
There were a number of persons who thought they were enrolled in the party who really weren't, and were frustrated by their inability to change parties.
What can we do to make sure that the Democratic Party in New York State is held accountable?
There are different flavors of us on this issue. We think it's fine for a party to require somebody to say they're a Democrat to vote in a Democratic primary. We think that that's certainly within the right of the party to do so, but we don't think that there should be deadlines that make it very inconvenient for folks to have to do that.
We really do need to declare, I think, as a party, that structures like the one in New York are unacceptable, and especially when Democrats are in control. So we're going to affirm as a party that we will fight for voting rights across the board, and that we're willing to fight our own if necessary. That if Republicans were doing this, we would be crying bloody murder. So we just got to make sure that the DNC, besides the education point, I think we need to make it clear that we want to change, and that change has to come even if we have to fight members of the Democratic Party within the state of New York, because it is wholly unacceptable that Democrats who have the power to change this right now, they don't have to wait till tomorrow, they don't have to wait till next year, they can change it right now, but yet they continue to allow this process to work because it works for establishment folks within those states, and they don't care about the voters. So
the state, just to be clear, so the state party, without any action by the legislature, could open up its presidential primary to quote unquote independent voters?
Yes, I believe so.
Again, we are supposed to be, or the Democratic Party progressives are supposed to be the party of opening up the process, and the Republicans are trying to suppress voters. What steps have been taken to open up that process in general?
Yeah, well, some of us are fighting to open up the primaries. to let unaffiliated or independent voters participate. It's funny, so some Pew data I saw recently that show that closed primaries disproportionately affect young people of color because they happen to be many more democratically aligned independents. The higher percentage of young voters of color are democratically aligned independents. So I think we got to get the information out there, and we've got to continue to push. Like I said, New York State now we know that the party can make the change, and I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Democratic Party in New York to open up that process, to air out those smoky back rooms. The party bosses can't just run the show in New York anymore.
So certainly anything we can do to improve for the next time would be helpful to all of us. The voters, the administrators, combined.
But there's a lot of concern here about, how does our party grow? How do we welcome independents? It's the number one. Non-registered voters are the largest bloc in the country. And how do we grow the party? And so there's a lot of concern about that.
And there was a lot of focus on, we want people to register as Democrats. We want them to be Democrats, but millennials are just independents. They don't want to be tied down by that. How can you reconcile that? How can you open the process to people who just don't want to register?
I think this is one of those ongoing questions. For me, it's not about how do we just let independents into the primary system, because I know that's one option. For me, it's how do we make a party that millennials want to be part of? And how do we make sure that we're talking about the issues that millennials care about? That's climate change, right? It's making sure that we're not just turning a blind eye to pipelines that are being developed everywhere. It's making sure that LGBT folks are at the table and diverse communities are at the table, and that we're actually putting up candidates that look like our communities, both in age, race, and gender.
What do you want to see the Democratic Party do going forward?
Essentially, what I care most about going forward in this is I really want to see a focus on getting money out of politics. There's a small blurb in it in the handout that we got coming in here. It really needs to be a bigger focus because that really does touch on any other issue that anyone can really care about. My number one fight is climate change, environmental justice. You can't be fully effective fighting that until you get the money out of politics. So that's really what I want to see come out and be focused on.
How is the party focusing on encouraging them to register as Democrats, to vote in primaries and the general election? Because it doesn't seem like the consensus was to allow independents to vote in the primaries.
Yeah, and in most states they can. But what's incredible is that when you go to a Democratic Party meeting, there are not enough Democrats to win a national office. There are not enough Republicans to win a national office. You have got to bring in non-aligned or independent voters into your coalition in order to win the presidency of the United States. And I just think enough people don't get that. And giving the increasing number of young people who choose to be an independent voter, although they may be democratically aligned or Republican aligned.
I really am not interested in opening our primary process to independents. What I want to do is make the Democratic Party a place that people want to be, marking that check on the box that they are proud Democrats.
Do you think that it's a viable solution to, on primary day, even in primary states, have people register as Democrats right there and then?
Yeah, and I think that is a great way to bring in independents. I think that you'll see a tremendous amount of people running as Democrats in the 2020 presidential election, and people will want to be engaged in that process. That's going to be a perfect opportunity for states to make sure that they have same-day voter registration, or in caucuses where you can change your party identification on that day so they can be Democrats then.
No matter what, the people are going to love to participate. We saw with Bernie Sanders, he raised all campaign donations or little donations. He didn't have to take any super PAC money. And I think when people feel heard, they'll be more engaged, they'll be more willing to participate and give money. And, hopefully if we help fix wages and do stuff like that, people will have more money to inject into the Democratic Party and enliven it once they feel that they're actually part of it and being heard.
It's very short-sighted to push so many people out who are aligned with the Democratic Party, even if they're not card-carrying members. I think is really short-sighted. And, for me, it's especially funny because, I've lived most of my life in either Vermont or Virginia, and neither place has party registration. You just go into the primary and you say, I want the Democratic ballot or the Republican ballot. And so, none of these people that come from places like New York and Pennsylvania, other places where they have these rigid party registration rules, I just think that's from the 19th century, and they need to move on, frankly.